In the very first chapter of Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin puts you beyond the wall in the freezing dark with a group of men that are about to die. And he doesn't stop to explain the wall. He doesn't tell you the history of the Night's Watch. He doesn't give you a map. He gives you the way breath fogs and freezes on beard hair, the way the horses won't settle, the way the silence feels wrong, and the way the men can't name, but their bodies already know. And somehow, with no explanation at all, you understand everything. The world, the danger, the stakes, all of it. Built in about 2 paragraphs through pure feeling. I spent years trying to figure out how he did that. Every time I tried to build a world, I'd end up with weeks of maps and timelines and nothing written. Martin makes readers feel like they've lived in Westeros their whole lives without stopping to explain any of it. There's a specific thing he's doing, and once I saw what it was, I couldn't unsee it. This video is about sensory detail, not as decoration, but as the actual way a world gets built in your reader's mind while the story is still moving. At the end of this video, you'll know how to weave the world into the scene without stopping the action. You'll see why a few precise details do more work than a long description. And you'll know how to stay in the flow of writing instead of disappearing into research for 3 weeks every time you need to establish a new setting. Welcome everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Daniel, and this is The Story Renaissance. Sensory detail isn't just mood. It isn't just decoration you add after the real writing is done. It's information, but information the reader receives through experience, not explanation. That difference matters a lot. When you tell a reader a castle is ancient and imposing, they learn a fact. When you tell them that the stone walls sweat in summer and the porches leave black scars on the ceiling that go back longer than anyone can remember, they have an experience. The fact sits on the surface. The experience goes somewhere deeper. It builds a physical reality the reader lives in rather than looks at. Game of Thrones does this all the way through, but the way Martin introduces us to Winterfell is worth a closer look. He doesn't give you a tour of the castle. He doesn't list its towers or explain its past. He gives you Winterfell through Bran, a boy who spent his whole life climbing every wall and rooftop of the place. Bran knows it the way you know a childhood home, not as a building, but as a physical feeling. So you get the rough, cold stone under his fingers, the way some walls are older and crumble in a different way, the specific pride of reaching a height that no one else would even risk trying. The castle comes alive through a body moving through it, through touch and cold air and the feeling of height. Because of that, you don't just know what Winterfell looks like, you know what it feels like to belong to it, which is exactly what Martin needs you to feel about the Stark children before anything else happens. The sensory detail isn't separate from the character work, it is the character work. The world and the person are built at the same time through the same details. That's what sensory detail is doing at its best. It's not describing the world, it's putting the reader inside of it. Once you see that difference, the question changes. It's no longer, what does my reader need to know about this world? It's, what do they need to feel? And here's where most writers get stuck. They understand this in theory, then they sit down to write and they feel like they need to get everything in, every texture, every smell, every piece of visual information in the scene. And that feeling, however well meant, is exactly what creates the dreaded info dump. The urge to describe everything comes from a real place. You've built this world, you know it, you want the reader to know it too, so you give them all of it. The buildings, the climate, customs, the light, the sounds, the feel of the ground underfoot, and the reader's eyes glaze over. Not because they don't care about the world, because no brain can hold that much information at one time and turn it into a lived experience. Long descriptions don't build a world in the reader's mind, they describe one. And there's a big difference between a world that's described and a world that feels lived in. What precision does, what a small number of well-chosen details do, is give the reader's imagination something to grab onto and finish. You don't describe everything, you describe the 2 or 3 things that are so specific and so right that the reader's brain fills in the rest on its own. The world doesn't need to be fully drawn on the page, it needs to be fully suggested. The Red Wedding in Game of Thrones is a masterclass in this. Martin doesn't spend pages establishing the hall, the guests, the layout of the twins. What he gives you instead are a handful of precise details that do enormous work. The musicians in the gallery who've been playing the same song too many times, the wine that keeps getting refilled without anyone asking, the way the doors seem to close at the wrong moment. None of those details are explained. None of them announce that they matter, but they pile up into a feeling of skin-prickling wrongness that make the violence feel like it was always coming. Martin chose those details because they were the right ones. Not all of them, the right ones. And the scene hits so hard in the gut because of that precision. The question isn't how much detail to include, it's which details to include. And that question has a specific answer. The details that work are almost never the ones that describe what something looks like. They're the ones that tell you what it feels like to be in that place, in that moment. It's that person. So the first filter for any detail isn't, is this accurate or atmospheric? It's, whose experience is this? What would this specific character notice right now, given who they are, what they're feeling, what they're afraid of, and what they want? A soldier entering a throne room notices different things than a servant. A hungry peasant walking through a market notices different things than a merchant. The character's inner state shapes what they see, and what they see is what the reader gets. So the detail isn't just world building, it's also character work at the same time. Daenerys' chapters in Game of Thrones do this very well. When she arrives in the new city, Astapor, Yunkai, Marine, Martin doesn't give you a tour of the place from above. He gives you the city through Daenerys' eyes, and her eyes are always calculating. She's always reading power, looking for weakness, finding the thing that she can use. In Astapor, she notices the harpy on top of the pyramid before she notices anything else. Not because it's the most visually prominent thing, but because Daenerys is always reading symbols of power. The detail is hers. It comes from who she is. And because of that, it does two jobs at once. It builds the place and shows the character without slowing the scene down to do either one. That's the filter, not what's in this place. What would this person notice right now, given everything they're carrying into this moment? Once you're choosing details through that filter, something else changes too. You stop needing to set up the whole world before the scene can start. The details come from inside the scene, from inside the character, not from a separate world-building project running on the side. And that's what keeps the writing flowing instead of constantly stopping. But there's one more layer to this, the thing that turns a detail from just nice to truly alive. And it's the part most writers don't think to do. The detail that only describes is doing one job. The detail that describes and reveals something about the character is doing two. But the most powerful details in the best fiction are doing 3 or 4 things at once. Building the world, showing the character, setting the mood, and pressing on the tension that's already running under the scene. That kind of detail isn't harder to write. It just needs to be chosen more carefully. It asks not just what does this character notice, but what does this detail mean right now? What does it carry beyond its surface information? The scene in Game of Thrones where Ned Stark sits in the throne room after the king has left, surrounded by the swords of the conquered, in the seat of power he doesn't want and doesn't trust, is built almost entirely on one detail, the Iron Throne itself. Martin describes it as uncomfortable, as designed to cut the unworthy. Previous kings have bled on it. Aegon had it made that way deliberately, a throne that punishes whoever sits on it. The detail isn't just world building, it isn't just atmosphere. It's the whole theme of the book made into a physical thing. Power in Westeros hurts the people that hold it. The throne literally cuts you. Ned sits in it wrong, unable to get comfortable. You feel how much he doesn't belong there, not just in terms of politics, but in your body. The sensory detail and the meaning are the same thing. That's what a detail looks like when it's doing everything at once. I'm not saying every detail in your story needs to carry that much weight, but the details you slow down for, even slightly, should be earning their place on more than one level. Not just what's here, but what does it mean that this thing is here, noticed by this person in this moment? When I'm writing a draft and I reach for a detail, I've started asking, what else can this do? Can it tell me something about the character? Can it carry the mood of the scene? Can it press on the tension that's already there? If the detail can only describe, I'll look for a better one. Usually it's right there, just 1 degree more specific, 1 degree more personal in the character, 1 degree more connected to what the scene is actually about. That's the whole point. Not more detail, better detail. Here's what I've come to understand about world building that changed how I approach a draft. The world isn't something you build before the story. It's something you find while you're writing it, through the characters, through the scenes, through the moments where a detail is needed, and you have to find the right one. For Research Trap, the weeks of maps and timelines before a word of the story gets written comes from thinking the world has to be fully finished before the characters can move through it. But the characters don't need a finished world. They need a specific one. They need the details that are true for them in this moment, in this scene. And those details can only be found by being inside of the scene, not by building the world from the outside first. George R.R. Martin didn't finish the world and then put his characters in it. The world and the story grew together. Each scene asked for the details it needed. Each detail showed something new about the world that fed into the next scene. You can't front load that with research. You have to be inside of it. What I'm trying to make in my own writing is away from world building as preparation and towards world building as discovery. Before you write a scene, don't ask, what does the reader need to know about this world? Ask, what does my character feel in this moment? And what one specific living sensory detail carries that feeling onto the page. That detail is the world building. Everything else is just procrastination. Here's what I want you to try after this video. Go Go to the next scene you need to write, or one you've already written that feels flat, and ask 3 questions. Whose experience is this? What would this specific character notice right now, given everything they're carrying? And what else can the detail do beyond just describing? You don't need more details, you need the right ones. Find one detail that earns its place on more than one level, and the scene will feel more alive than a whole paragraph of description ever could. Now that you understand this, the next video you need to watch is this one I made about the 15-minute scene check I use when my pacing feels soggy. Because once your world is alive on the page and your details are doing real work, the next question is whether the energy is actually moving between your scenes. The 2 videos go hand in hand. I'll see you there.